dumbest thing you ever got in trouble for at school? Story 1, I got two things. One, I sang happy birthday with a whole bunch of my friends to someone at lunch, and we were to split up because it was inappropriate. Two, someone kicked my chair and I fell, and I got a detention while they didn't get anything. Story 2, not quite school, but a school function. I almost got kicked out of prom for being drunk. Simply because I didn't want to dance, I was sitting at the table watching everyone else's stuff, and 3 staff members dragged me outside to ask me how much I had to drink that day. Meanwhile, there's girls who obviously have been drinking on the dance floor not being bothered. Story 3, my dad had a you can't stay homesick from school unless you're extremely sick, mainly because he worked from home and didn't like being bothered. So unless I had a fever of over 103 and or was throwing up, I went to school, and to be honest, until I got my driver's license, I had nothing to do otherwise, so I had very little reason to skip. So one day my freshman year in high school, I'm sick. I can't eat because I'm queasy, but I haven't thrown up at all, and I didn't have a fever, so off to school I go. I get to third class, and I realize I'm going to toss my cookies. I'm in the middle of science class, and we're supposed to be doing some quiet activity sheet, so I raise my hand to ask to use the bathroom. The teacher is a hard ass and says that I should have gone during break between class. I said to her, no, really, I'm about to vomit. She infers that I'm lying and that I need to get back to work on my sheet. So I walked up to her, handed her the completed activity sheet, and threw up on her lap. She calls security and tells them I intentionally assaulted her with vomit. I was suspended for 2 days, and my parents had to threaten legal action against the school district to get the suspension reversed. Turns out I had the norovirus. Story 4 was sick and asked to go to the bathroom. Teacher said no. I vomited in her trash can. She tried to get me expelled. I can still hear my dad laughing in the principal's office. Story 5, in the same year, I learned to write. I got in trouble for showing my teacher I could write upside down while not looking. I was super proud of it for some reason, but I guess I was not taking my writing seriously. Story 6, in primary school, we weren't allowed to talk during lunch. Go figure why. But people who did had to go stand in the corner until the others were finished. I had to go too. Story 7, we were reading a Shakespeare play in HS English at a private school. The teacher asked if anyone knew what a line meant, where a character is talking about a pen as if it were a penis. When she asked, whole class said penis, and I said wrong. I got a detention for using inappropriate language because I didn't use the clinical term. Story 8, got a week's worth of detention, once because someone spread a rumor that another girl and I were having in the bathroom between classes. Teacher, whose class ID supposedly left, backed me up that I hadn't left class while I was supposedly getting it on. As far as anyone knew, I was straight. I didn't really know the girl ID allegedly hooked up with. What I actually got detention for was telling the principal that I didn't think it was any of his business when he started asking about my history. Story 9, one time in primary school, I went into school with a weird pain in my side. It felt like a muscle stitch, so I didn't think much of it, assuming it would get better after a few minutes or so. Flash forward about an hour, and we're all sat in assembly. I'm almost doubled over in pain, cause it hurts to breathe, and some kid next to me keeps talking to me. As I try and tell him to stop, I get singled out by the teacher for disturbing the assembly, and so I have to stand up almost in tears from the pain and walk out of the assembly to sit outside while everyone watches. Flash forward about another 30 minutes, and I'm lying on the floor of the head mistress office, waiting for an ambulance to come and pick me up so I could be taken to hospital and later diagnosed with swine flu. Story 10, we had to sculpt a clay bust, then glaze and fire it. I made mine a black man. I had to go explain to the principal why I made mine black, and a letter went home. In white, no black kids went to the school. This was 5th grade. I had to have no idea why it was an issue, and neither did my family. Story 11, I was in pre-K, and my teacher took our class to the bathroom. It's important to note that every door looked exactly the same, and I was 3 or 4. I was getting some water, and when I looked up, my entire class had just walked off without me. So I toddled down the hall and opened the door I thought was my class. Spoiler, it wasn't. The teacher of that class gave me back to my teacher, and I got put in timeout. Yes, I got put in timeout because my teacher left me at the bathroom. Story 12, I was a mouthy little at school, but I also had some teachers. One would often start his classes off with stories about his day-to-day life, normally pretty chauvinistic in nature. One fateful day, he started with the word so. On the way to work, I passed a really ugly woman, to which I chipped in, was it your wife, sir? The teacher flipped, screamed at me to leave his classroom, and threatened a world of pain if we crossed paths again during that week. I went to the library for an hour and kept my head down for a fortnight, just to be sure. Story 13, back when I was in HS, my school banned salt. So I literally had to smuggle salt to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Kids were also selling it. It was ridiculous. I never got in trouble, but others did. I went to boarding school, FYI. Story 14, plagiarism. I didn't use the correct MLA format 2 years before we learned about it, and was chewed out as if I claimed I wrote the Magna Carta. Fighting, a tiny kid tried to punch me, and I held him at arm's length by the shoulder like a cartoon, so he couldn't connect, in front of everybody. I've told this story before, but a friend of mine got yelled at for missing class to get scheduled chemo treatments. He died a few months later. Story 15, when I was like 6, there was a broken gutter on the playground, leaking rainwater, and my friend and I thought we looked cool with damp brushback hair and absolutely soaked our heads under it. We got yelled at cause we'll catch a cold, but they made us go stand at the wall still outside for the rest of lunch. Yak now, instead of sending us to dry our hair. Story 16, I was in 4th grade, and a big crack of lighting came down right outside the window, and I screamed, like really screamed. I got sent to the principal, because apparently that wasn't a mature reaction and got attention. Story 17, in 2nd grade, I got yelled at by my teacher for helping a kid didn't understand the lesson after he was done speaking. The kid had already asked for help, and he ignored him, and I was already done, so I decided to help him, then got punished and yelled at for doing so. Story 18, the cameras caught me poking holes in the back of school bus seat on the same day. My mother got a call from the school saying I had missed too many days of school while sick, which was received because I missed that day. Long story short, I shared the seat with a goody two-shoes kid, and they just automatically pushed the blame on me because I was a bit of a brat. Story 19, we weren't allowed to run or play games on the play structures. One time we got in trouble for playing hide and seek, and they made us go play it in the field. We only had one tree, so it was a pretty shitty game of hide and seek. Story 20, got a detention for putting my stuff in my locker. Teacher thought I entered the school early, but nope, my locker was literally right inside the front door, so I could drop my stuff off as soon as I walked in. Pretty much everyone else's locker was past where she was standing as hall monitor. Even when I showed her where my locker was, still got the detention, protested to the principal, and was told to it up and serve the detention. Gave a lot fewer after that day, and got more detentions for other dumb. Story 21, when I was in grade 5, we did a We Are the World lip sync for the Christmas concert. Yes, this was a long time ago. I volunteered to be Kenny Rogers. I really wanted to be Kenny Rogers for some reason. No one else volunteered, so I got what I wanted. I was asked by the teacher to also play Paul Simon, as we didn't have enough people. So, some people had to play 2 roles. My mom had made me a Kenny Rogers outfit and had makeup ready. A day before the concert, the teacher said that Anna Pyle wouldn't be in the concert unless she was Kenny Rogers. I got in trouble because I threw a fit and said that wasn't fair. She'd get to choose which part one gave up. I had to be Paul Simon. No costume, as he just looks like a normal dude. No cool beard makeup. You into piles of. One time I got sent to the nurse for farting twice in math class. This was in 7th grade. Story 22, classmate tickled me for a few seconds, and I fell out of the chair pretty badly. But I made a huge noise by falling, and my teacher didn't like that. So she wrote the note to my parents about how much I was inappropriate during class. Apologize for any mistakes. Story 23, I started school left-handed. That was bad. I felt like the worst person in the world all through kindergarten and 1st grade because I kept messing up using my left hand to write ECT. I had in recess detention at least twice a week for it. This was also back in the late 80s when it was acceptable for teachers to hit children. UMSD, I hope the devil diddles you daily with his left hand covered in barbed wire when you're rotting in. We would get class posters in school, same pictures that would end up in your yearbook photos. They came in these little cardboard tubes and also had a rubber band around it. As I was taking off the rubber band, I accidentally let go of it and it flung across the classroom. Instant Saturday school detention for flicking rubber bands at students. Story 24, I wrote this on a different post, but I just decided to paste it on here, just because I think it's stupid. When I was in 8th grade, I had this teacher who for some reason hated my gut. I don't know what I did, honest to God. I never disrupted her class. I hardly talked. I've always been respectful to my teachers. The most I think I could have done was not do good in her subject, because it was science, and I have never been good at science. Another important thing, the school was tired of people talking when they weren't supposed to and not paying attention. So they made what was called a check, where you would kind of put your hand up like this to form a check, sort of. And it was to help hold those around you accountable or something. No one did it. It was not a rule, you had to do it. And the most it became was a stupid joke that turned into people making shooting motions at each other. One day, my friends and I were all sitting around our table. It's just the 4 of us, and our teacher gave the class a word search puzzle to do. My friend C and I started doing out work. We love things like word searches, Sudoku puzzles, etc. Anything to get our minds going. We were quiet as we worked because we were really focused. Our other 2 friends, then we started talking, I forget what about, but they were talking instead of doing their work. The teacher came by and gave a warning and told them they need to get their work done and be quiet down and get to work. But then they start talking again, and the teacher comes back and warns them and be quiet down again. And one final time, they start talking again. So the teacher finally says, I've given you more than enough chances to stop talking. You guys need to see me for detention. and she walks away to get some detention slips. Now I'm thinking, man, A and B aren't going to be there for lunch. It's just going to be me and C. Damn, but no, this comes back with 4 slips. She gives ones to A and B, then she gives the other 2 to C and me. So C and I are like, WTF? We weren't talking, and my teacher starts saying that we were talking. My friends A and B admit that C and I were not talking and that we were working. Some other girls from the table beside us intervened and also told the teacher that C and I were not talking. The teacher is quiet for a moment. She looks like she's been caught. She stutters a few times, trying to find something to say. Then she comes up with, you didn't check them, my friends, and I look at each other. You didn't check your table mates. You should have helped them quiet down and do their work. You should have checked them. This literally tried to pin us with something we didn't do. Then when it became obvious that we didn't do it, that everyone had backed us up, she pulls some stupid from her, my friends A and B apologized, saying they were sorry and that the teacher was, and that they'd make it up to C and I. C and I tell them it's okay. They didn't do anything wrong and that the teacher was going to get an earful from our parents. Honestly, more from C's parents. C was an honor student, got good grades, best behavior reports, a model student. We knew they'd be pissed when they found out C got detention for something as stupid as this. My friend C, though, she had a pizza party for getting a good score on a test. She went to the teacher after class and told her, and the teacher released her from detention. I had the pizza party too, since I got a good score, and I also told the teacher. I showed her my slip. She full out denied me, and when I asked why she let C go and not me, again she stuttered, looking like she's been caught, and once again pulled out of her because you didn't get your work done. I pull out my sheet that I finished, the words all neatly highlighted and cross out. Then she goes, you have detention, and she drops it like that. Whatever, I brought pita chips for lunch, so my friend B and I shared them and chewed as loud as we could, mouths open, slurping our fruit cups, moaning when we took a bite. Yeah, she got fired the next year though, sorry for the long post. Story 25, wearing a black undershirt. We had a dress code in my school where you had to wear a collared shirt that didn't really care about the color or the design much, except you couldn't have really big words or logos on them. One day, I actually got written up because I had on a black shirt underneath my collared shirt. The dean that wrote me up really hated me, so, of course, it was a really obscure rule that no one really cared about. But he liked to get me in trouble for whatever dress code violation he could. I got in trouble so much that I actually got voted most likely to be out of dress code my senior year. Story 26, in 4th grade, I went to go pee. There were 2 or 3, I don't exactly remember other girls, and they're being complete idiots. They were yelling and being obnoxious. They were by the sinks. All I wanted to do was wash my hands. But then the teacher sent another girl down to see where they were, since they had been gone for a long time. We all got sent to the principal, even though I wasn't even doing anything. It was my first time being sent to the principal, so I thought I was going to die. Story 27, I hope I'm not too late for this. And it gets buried because I have a good one. In middle school, they gave us assigned seats at lunch for a while, because they wanted to see if it was any table in particular that kept stuff up in the cafeteria. On the upside, we got to pick our seats originally and got to sit by our friends. The downside was if you weren't walking to your seat or sitting in your seat or getting food and you were found not in your seat, you got a week of detention. So one day we go to our table and this big kid with anger issues is sitting at our table. He wasn't supposed to be there. We asked him to get up and he just roared at us. So when he got up to get food, we just took the seat back. Well, when he comes back, he pulls up a chair and joins us again. They also had a rule where if more than 6 people were at a table, the whole table got detention for a week. So we were freaking out trying to get him to leave, but he just roared again. He goes up to get more food, and we weren't sure what to do, so we just hid the chair under the table because we didn't know where it came from. Dude comes back, and instead of getting another chair or yelling at us, he instead decides to jump on the table and keep jumping, screaming fat on the table over and over again. So teachers and security come over, and instead of taking care of the kid jumping on the table, they instead decide to yell at us for having a chair underneath the table. We all got in trouble, but no one questioned the kid that broke the lunch table. Story 28, when I was in grade 4 or 5, a few other girls and I'm a girl played werewolves at recess. One of the girls put a death threat note in my locker, claiming to be one of the wolves. We had imaginary wolves in our wolf community, and we had the wolves we played. The note had fake blood and everything. Detailed paragraphs of how the wolf was going to eat me and drink my blood. There were like 2 or 3 pages stapled together and cut out photos of black wolves that came out of my locker as I opened it. I showed my teacher, and she thought it was me. The note was written on Word with the chiller font, and I didn't even have a working printer. The word got around, and my whole grade thought I did it to myself because I wanted people to feel sorry for me or give me attention. The principal had a long talk with me about lying, and he eventually called my mom. She told him that I was a liar at home like every 9-year-old was, and not to believe me. My other friends got notes too, except one girl. But it was apparently still me that did it. For some reason, we didn't come to the realization that it was the girl who didn't get the note. Years later we did. Story 29. In high school, we lost a rivalry football game badly, and most of the guys I knew in the team and a few coaches were cunts. So I wore the other school's colors clothing the following day. One of the cunniest coaches of the team was one of the PE teachers, and he flies across the hall to me and goes with the "Are you doing?" I said I like teams that win, so he made me walk with him to the principal's office while berating me the entire way. The principal and vice principal were like, "Dude, we both used to work over at that school, and he's not breaking any dress code. You have 2 seconds to release him back to class, or you're going on immediate suspension, etc., etc." I loved taking PE every following semester because I was now untouchable from that. Story 30. Coughing. We were in a line, supposed to be quiet, but I coughed, and they thought I was faking it too, is probably when I entered the class as the bell was ringing, and the teacher wasn't even ready yet. Story 31. Librarians were selling muffins in the library to help raise funds for band. I bought a poppy seed muffin and took it to a table and started to eat it. A teacher walked up to me, unaware that library staff were selling muffins, and told me that I was rude to be eating a muffin in the library. She told me to get out, and when I pointed out that the staff had been selling the muffins, she got angry for pointing that out to her. She asked for my name, and I gave her a fake one. After that, I left the library and went outside to eat the rest of my muffin. Later that day, I was called into the principal's office and my behavior was questioned. Apparently, someone heard me give a fake name and told that teacher my real name. I explained to the principal what happened, and he agreed that nothing was done wrong, but I still got detention for giving a fake name, and to please that teacher's search for justice, I was forced to apologize to her. Story 32. Having shirt untucked. Big thing at private schools. However, in high school, ended up at a super hardcore religious school, where the teachers were just complete bags. They thought they were drill sergeants at basic. One particular nozzle would literally walk along the benches at lunchtime, trying to see if your shirt was untucked. Yeah, even at lunch, sitting in the bench, you could get in trouble for it. One person got expelled. I went over the student handbook and found sweaters with the school logo could be worn year-round. So when confronted about my shirt being untucked, I pulled the sweater out of my bag and put it on. I was like, "Now you don't know it's untucked, you can't see it." He turned red, ready to scream, and I said, "Go ahead, try to remove my sweater, see where that gets you. He'll hit you and get you arrested." I got sent to the head monk, who acted as principal again, super religious school. So monk holy guys ran everything, and he said I was in the right and nothing could happen. 34 of the school suddenly wore sweaters every day and openly boasted about not having shirts tucked in or even on. Couple teachers still try to be dicks and turn up the heat real high in their rooms, but we endured. Story 33. When I was in elementary school, I drew 2 stick figure dudes with sword in their hands. No gore, no blood. Just 2 stick figures with swords. My teacher saw my drawing, and my mom was called by the school. They brought her in for a meeting and explained how I was prone to violence, and the drawing would be put on my permanent record. I can see how the school wanted to help me if I was indeed showing signs of something serious. But at the same time, I'm pretty sure a lot of normal kids like to draw little stick figures. Story 34. We were watching a Harry Potter movie in my junior high mythology class, and this kid kept quoting the movie out loud. And I told him to shut up. My teacher yelled at me, and would have continued if my classmates hadn't come to my defense. It's been at least 6 years since that happened, and I'm still unreasonably angry over it. You Colin, edit Colin, if you read this, I am sorry. It wasn't your fault. It was that dumb teacher, crazy mofo looking frick. MRS McNaughton, more like MRS. MCNOT good. Technical senior year high school. Was walking between buildings to class with a friend. My friend was kind of nerdy and a bit of a weakling. It's cool, we've all got our strengths and weaknesses. I wasn't an athlete by any means, but I was in decent shape and had done a bunch of martial arts growing up. My friend had mentioned that some kids had basically been picking on him, and I thought that it was crazy that there were still kids acting like bullies in 12th grade. Sure enough, these kids show up, 1 leader and 2 minions. The leader gets in my friend's face and starts acting aggressive. So I tell him to back off. The bully snaps and starts swinging at me. The school had a strict no fighting policy. Not only could you get in trouble for attacking someone, they were adamant that all parties involved got the same punishment. Yes, you could not only get your kicked, but then you could also get in trouble for being involved in the kicking. I hate the admin of that school to this day. So I know that teachers walk around often and that fighting will get me in trouble. So I dodge this kid's wide telegraph hooks until a teacher comes by. We get broken up. I haven't thrown a single punch and taken to the principal's office. We both get slapped with 4-hour detentions. I lose it. I asked the principal what I should have done instead in such a situation. He told me I should have left to find a teacher, for what my friend would have already gotten jumped. I asked him if that's what he would have done. Would he have left his own friend at the first sign of danger? It eventually came to nothing as my dad got me out of the detention, but he'll never forget that incident or that principal. Story 35. I got in trouble for sleeping. Though it wasn't sleeping that got me in trouble, The history teacher woke me up and asked me a question he thought I didn't know. When I answered correctly, he sent me to the principal's office. The same teacher ended up entering me into a geography bee without my knowledge, so I had no time to study for it and ended up coming in first place. Story 36, junior in high school, in science class, and we needed to glue things together. Elmer's had clear glue instead of the traditional white. I wondered if it tasted the same as white glue that I had eaten when I was younger, had a conversation with some friends about it, and naturally tasted it. Teacher noticed me squirting in my mouth and sent me to office. The assistant principal read the note for the referral stating I was eating paste, laughed, and gave me 3 detentions, and to satisfy curiosity, it does taste the same. Story 37, in middle school after school, I was waiting to get picked up outside. It was raining, and instead of standing under an overhang, I was standing in the rain. I got detention for that. Also, same middle school, someone threw a ball at me to try and hit me, and an aide told me to go pick the ball up. I told her no because it was thrown at me. Detention. Story 38, I got into an argument with the daughter of an important guy. I think he was on the school's board of directors or something like that. She went to the headmaster and falsely accused me of threatening to hit her. When the headmaster talked to me in his office later, he very bluntly told me he knew I was innocent and that I was like the 10th person that same girl had accused of the same thing just that month. She does that all the time. I know she's lying, but I would be in trouble with her father if I didn't punish you. Don't worry, they'll give you a small token punishment, he said. Said punishment was being held back in detention after classes every day for like 2 weeks, but being allowed to go as soon as the other kids were gone. So I wouldn't actually have to spend hours in detention while making a spectacle of my punishment for the douchebag daughter to feel satisfied. If I lived near the school or had someone to drive me home, I'd have arrived home 10 minutes later than usual, so it would have been fine, but I had to take the bus, and those 10 minutes made me miss it every day, forcing me to wait 1 hour for the next one. So the fake punishment did turn into a real one because I did have to spend an additional hour at school every day just to placate that hoe. Story 39, 1. Not having my glasses. When I was in grade 2, I had 2 pairs of glasses. I lost the one that I had, and my teacher said she couldn't find the one that she had. Anyway, I went to order a new pair. At school, my teacher kicked me out of class until I had my new glasses because, and I quote, "You can't concentrate in class without your glasses. I have no idea how that makes." Anyway, my grandmother came to school. 2 days later, with a camera and the phone of the local newspaper, I was brought back in class pretty quick after that. 2. Breathing with my mouth open. I was born with something obstructing my nasal cavity, and now I have breath through my mouth. She demanded my mother ask the doctor for proof of my surgery. I needed nasal surgery, which I had at 7. She got angry at me and called me a liar when I told her the doctor refused. She hated me because I'm of English origin. Story 40. I was a really behaved kid. So one day we're all waiting for class to start, and I'm reading a book. A sub goes and stands in front of the class and immediately throws me under the bus and says they won't take my disrespect for reading when they're starting class. My class was like, "WTF, you just yelled at the mute." And this is dumb on my part, but I skipped class with a friend and we were getting McDonald's. These girls had our teacher on speed dial and ratted us out immediately. I was given detention, still wonder how they ratted us out without repercussion when they were also at that McDonald's. Story 41, kind of long, but Waytevs in high school, my ex-boyfriend and I had broken up, and he was pulling that whole "I'm gonna kill myself if we don't get back together" bull over text. It got worse and more descriptive, and my dad suggested I show and tell the counselor, so he, my ex, could get some help. Me being me, did so. Now, I hadn't replied to those texts in bad ways. I had simply said we aren't getting back together, and he needs help, yada yada yada. He did, and pretty sure still does have some mental health issues, which I hope he's gotten help for. Anyways, counselor and principal read it all, and I somehow got in trouble for exploiting his personal problems, and he should get help on his own. They didn't do anything and or talk to him about it, but I did get detention and Saturday school for a week. Story 42, I had a decent-sized afro in high school. I would often just stick my hairpick in my hair rather than put it in my pocket or something, but the assistant principal always gave me for it. I wasn't punished for having it as long as it wasn't in my hair, so it obviously wasn't considered a weapon. It sure as wasn't a hat. So I never knew why he was on my about it. Story 43, in high school, I would bring a little one-use bottle of mouthwash to school to use after lunch. One day my stomach was hurting and I felt really nauseous, so I went to the nurse. I had to take off my hoodie. So I emptied the pockets, and she saw the empty bottle of mouthwash and immediately started asking me questions about drinking alcohol. I explained to her that I didn't like my breath to stink after lunch for my girlfriend, but she wasn't having it. She went and told the vice principal that I was drinking at school and got sent home am pretty sure I was going to get suspended, but I think my mom talked them out of it when she came to pick me up because I had never got caught doing anything wrong in school before. TLDR got sent home from school for trying to keep my breath fresh with mouthwash after lunch because they thought I was getting drunk. Story 44, Drinking Monster Energy. My 11th grade history teacher called security, and I was escorted out by two people and taken to the nurse where my eyes were checked and dilated and accused of potentially being on drugs, but the nurse wasn't familiar with the effects of an energy drink, so she couldn't be sure. My backpack was checked by security and a police officer when they found a permanent marker. They wanted to get me for all of the graffiti in the school. When they found my 5-pocket knife, they wanted to get me for weapons, even though I clearly pointed out that the student handbook stated anything under 2 was acceptable. My mom was called and told about everything, and I was forced to spend half of the day in a nurse's office flushing out my system with water before I was allowed to go back to my classes. My mom wouldn't let me buy energy drinks for months after that, because the school scared her into thinking it was bad dangerous for me. Edit, there was also a time in the 6th grade when we had a really old, perhaps 70s to 80s substitute teacher. The room was dead silent, and I was always the quietest one in my class. The sub suddenly yelled out at me for talking in class when my mouth had constantly been shut, no possible way to mistake me for talking. Although I didn't really have friends in the class, everyone stood up for me and let her know that she was wrong. She didn't really buy it, but didn't do anything else, and I was on her list for the rest of the day. My homeroom teacher in grade 7 who would give, in her words, all the boys who were bad detention for claims of us talking during class. Even though most of the guys in class were behaved, she never gave detention to any of the girls regardless of what they did or how noisy and chatty they were. It made me hate Junior, high with a passion after that. And probably why I didn't give about school after, I don't want to say her full name, but MS, BU for your arbitrary Miss Sanders bullshit. Edit, to clarify, she gave every dude in my class detention regardless of whether or not they actually did anything. Just one large group detention for the boys. I remember one of my friends was your typical bookworm and always got upset by it. He was a model straight student. Story 45, in preschool, I took off my cochlear implant and closed my eyes, which meant I couldn't hear my teacher at all, and read her face. She told me to put on my implant, but I couldn't hear her, so I never put my implant back on. Soon she grabbed my arm and marched me to the timeout spot for not listening to her. Story 46, all of the students in the room had to recite, but my answer had already been taken, and I can't think of a single clue anymore. So my teacher pulled both of my lips really hard and swore at me. Story 47, it's kind of a long story how it got started, but in high school, a boy who I really didn't know wanted my seat, and I said no, I'm very petite. So he said he would just pick me up and move me. He actually made the move to get up and come over to me. So I said if he touched me, I would kick him in the... Guess which one of us got sent to the principal? Me?